Morning. My name is Ontiveros. First name redacted, of course. Protocol. Senior Chief Petty Officer in Office of Naval Intelligence Liaison, Section... Right. Also redacted. Of course, while explaining my job in any other case would be an extreme breach, punishable by up to 20 years in the brig, I've been told by command that I've been given a few brief days to record my position within ONI. Anything that could, would, or may happen within and outside of UNSC control, I log to exact detail in these logs. Scenarios, really. In total, I've logged almost 239, and at this point in time, I'm due to hit 300 by the end of 2559. As per suggestion, I'll be starting with an older entry. Not one of the brighter scenarios, or one with what some consider a happy ending. I'll take that as forewarning. 001 GVMD, Gehenna class scenario. The beginning of this one, I'm sure many of you are incredibly familiar with. September 19th, 2552. Cairo Station is relatively quiet, save for a few ornery petty officers and the occasional groan of metal. Radar technicians below level are asleep, mostly. Those who have managed to stay awake are barely able to keep a focus on their screens in front of them. Technician Josiah Helms is halfway asleep at his terminal, having been worn out from a sparring session just an hour or two earlier. Of course, his sleep is interrupted by the system alerts. A Slipspace rupture. Not big enough to be the entire Covenant fleet, but not small enough to be a cruiser either. The technicians scramble to get a good image of the incoming ship, and Helms manages to get a composite of what came through the rupture itself. Having escaped reach with their lives and what little they could salvage from the planet, the crew of the UNSC Pillar of Autumn have, miraculously enough, arrived safely in Earth's orbit. The ship itself, scored and damaged by plasma, barely survived the trip. As the injured and wounded are offloaded to makeshift triage stations aboard the Cairo, Captain Jacob Keyes is unsettled. He was sure that the Covenant were on their tail. And not only had he violated Cole Protocol, but Keyes was certain that the whole of an alien fleet was to arrive out of Slipspace at any second. Minutes passed by. An hour. Hours. And despite constant check-ins with technicians and constant badgering to FleetCom, no Slipspace anomalies were ever detected. The Covenant, it seems, has lost the trail of the Pillar of Autumn, and Earth has been spared of their wrath. Halfway across the stars, this was a very different story for Supreme Commander Thel Vadami. The discovery of the installation was jarring, to say the least. To have recovered the sacred ring was one of Vadami's greatest accomplishments, and while any other Sangheli in his position would have been blinded by the ring's majesty, Vadami was not so easily swayed. While celebrations were underway throughout the city of High Charity, Vadami felt a certain unease about the ring that orbited before him. Host to thriving forests, teeming mires, and painted canyons, the ring itself seemed befitting to proper colonization. A second home to his people, Vadami thought, but even he knew that there was more to that ring than just an idyllic paradise. In an attempt at gathering intelligence on Halo, and behind the backs of the prophets, Vadami sensed the truth and reconciliation to the ring's surface. Leading reconnaissance is Zuka Zamami, a special operations officer, and one blessed by the prophets. Along with 3 groups comprised of Sangheli, Ungoi, and Kigyar, Zuka is sent deep into the swamps. Foul, unpleasant, and teeming with mudborne spawn, the trek through the environment proves unpleasant for most within the groups. Zamami, however, remains stalwart. Along the way, a few of the Ungoi begin to descend, unhappy with the muddied waters at their feet. Zamami is quick to dispatch the descendants. Zamami and his team find a Forerunner installation, while a small force stays behind to guard the surface. Zamami and his Sangheli descend further into the compound, finding little more than derelict terminals and empty corridors. Another Sangheli, a zealot named Joha Dradamai, begins to hear whispers. a voice in his head that is not his own. What they speak of is a mystery, even to him, and Drodomai is unable to decipher the lingering echoes. As Zamami and his group meet the end of yet another seemingly endless corridor, the next room they enter is strange. Bigger than the last of the few areas they've entered, the hall reeks of an indescribable stench, and the still eeriness is enough for Zamami to activate his energy sword at his hip. Cautiously, the group traverses forward, each of the Sanghili bearing the sword just as Zamami does. A few give curious glances to the windows beside them. Tanks, one notices, although they are empty. Drodomai ponders what, if anything, could have been contained within. A voice compels him to stray further to the glass, although Zamami ahead urges his brothers to follow closely, pulling Drodomai away from his thoughts. The Sanghili enter yet another room, although the scene they discover is a grisly one. Sanghili Honor Guard, thought to be the most venerated of their kind, and protectors to the most holy prophets, all lay dead before the group, their innards strewn about, and the bodies mangled into unrecognizable forms of their former selves. The room smells of an intolerable bile, and a yellow ichor drops from the ceiling, congealing in the cracks and crevices of the floor below, then skittering. Zamami can hear it through the walls, the flooring beneath his feet, and the surrounding pillars. Drodomai, the voices in his head now overpowering, is paralyzed with fear. He flees, leaving his brothers behind, caring little for Zamami's insults and calls to return to the fight. As Drodomai ascends on the elevator, the remaining Sanghili freeze. The air grows still, and the skittering grows into a cacophony of horrid, hellish screeching, and the tearing of flesh and bone. And as Zamami tells his brothers to stand their ground, the air around them thick with spores and blood, the walls around them split open, sealing the fate of the Sanghili. News spreads of Zamami's findings, a missing truth and reconciliation, and the Prophet of Regret's unsanctioned journey to the ring's surface. Vadami, having been summoned to High Charity, finds that the city has already descended into protest and chaos. Even with the Hierarch having gone missing, presumably lost to the ring forever, there is little time to mourn as questions begin to form as to what may have been found within Halo. Nearly 10 minutes into a heated disposition orchestrated by the Hierarchs, Vadami flips the questioning back onto the San Shayun. The Prophet of Truth, having already grown tired of the growing dissent from the Sanghili, is quick to accuse the Supreme Commander of heresy. However, reactions among the masses are mixed. While few agree with the notion, many are quick to accuse Truth of a cover-up of what was found on Halo. Some, knowing full well what risks they face for even uttering such a theory, bring the great journey itself into question. The uproar is cut short as alarms blare throughout High Charity. Vadami is alerted to an incoming ship via Covenant BattleNet, with the commotion of his own ship loud and clear in the comms background. The Hierarchs, especially Truth, promise a slow and torturous punishment for Vadami upon his return. The Supreme Commander could care less as he turns his back to the hierarchy, interested only in what had entered High Charity's proximity. Upon returning to his ship, Vadami's crew are quick to spot the incoming cruiser in the distance. His eyes are quick to recognize the indistinguishable markings of the Truth and Reconciliation. Vadami's relief is cut short, however, as he sees the battlecruiser covered in pustules, buboes, and lichen. Its trajectory unchanging, Vadami's orders for High Charity to be alerted to the incoming ship. A horrific screech sounds over communications, and Vadami can only watch in horror as the Truth and Reconciliation crashes into the Holy City. The explosion is enough to send the fleet of particular justice back, with some cruisers nearly pulled into Halo's atmosphere. Vadami's cruiser goes dark, the power knocked out and the auxiliaries failing to kick in during the blackout. Within 48 hours, High Charity becomes a main point of infestation and gestation. For the Flood.